It started with the soft flap of paper against my screen door, a notice tucked neatly into a white HOA envelope sealed with that smug official logo. I didn't think much of it at first. Probably just another boring meeting announcement or a reminder to trim the hedge. Living in this suburban maze of beige homes and overzealous rules, you learn to skim these things. But as I tore it open over my morning coffee, I felt my eyebrows knit together with each line I read. Dear resident, the HOA has approved the temporary use of your patio area for a scheduled community event on Saturday, June 10th. Access to the space will be needed from Friday evening through Sunday morning for setup and teardown. We thank you for your cooperation in supporting our neighborhood's shared celebrations. My patio? My patio. First I thought it must be a mistake. A typo. Surely they meant the community garden space at the end of the block, or maybe the rec center lawn. But the letter clearly had my address printed in bold. I set down my cup, walked out to the back patio I had poured hours and a ridiculous amount of money into. The fairy lights I strung myself still twinkled faintly in the early morning. My handcrafted cedar furniture, the hanging succulents, the cozy corner with plush pillows, all of it was curated with care. It wasn't just a patio, it was mine. My sanctuary after long workdays, my space for morning journaling, late-night wine, quiet conversations with friends, and now, the HOA. Wanted to let people tromp through it like it was a public park? Still hoping it was a mix-up, called the HOA. I should have known the voice on the other end would be Cheryl. It's the kind of person who probably alphabetizes her cereal boxes. Always chirpy, always vague. I asked her what this so-called community event was. She hesitated for a second too long, but then she said it. Oh, it's Karen's wedding. She asked to use the patio space because it has such a lovely layout. We thought it'd be a wonderful neighborly gesture. I blinked. Karen's wedding. My neighbor Karen. Yes, Cheryl chirped. She thought the aesthetics of your patio would make for beautiful wedding photos. And since she's on the HOA board, the rest of us approved it unanimously. She's getting married on my property, without even asking me. Well, Cheryl replied, her voice rising an octave. It's technically a shared structure. According to Section 8B of the guidelines, and Karen assured us it would be minimally disruptive. Minimally disruptive. My jaw clenched so hard I thought I might crack a tooth. I wasn't even going to be home that weekend. I had planned a quiet staycation with a friend flying in from out of town. I was supposed to let Karen the same. Karen, who once reported me to the HOA for overwatering my plants, hijacked my patio for a wedding ceremony I wasn't even invited to. I hung up and stared at the notice again. I flipped it over as if the back might hold a secret second message. It didn't. Just the printed words of a small tyrannical group that had no idea what line they'd just crossed. That night, I got home from work to find Karen herself out on the patio, clipboard in hand, gesturing to two men unloading floral arches from a van. My patio. I stormed out, trying to keep my voice level. Karen, what is this? She turned and smiled like I was a puppy who just barked for the first time. Oh, hey there. Just getting a head start on the layout. I want the aisle here, and the photographer says the lighting hits best right around 3 p.m. Hope you don't. Mind you mean you hope I don't sue? She laughed like I was telling a joke. Oh, come on, don't be petty. It's just one day. You should be happy for me. Besides, you never really use this space for anything big. The gall. Didn't even try to pretend this wasn't a hijacking. I opened my mouth, then shut it again. Was no getting through to her. This was Karen, a woman who once tried to ban wind chimes because they were too emotionally jarring. She was going to take what she wanted and count on everyone being too polite or powerless to stop her. But I wasn't powerless. Not. This time, I said nothing else. I walked back inside, locked the door behind me, and sat down at my kitchen table. The notice still lay open under the mug stain. I stared at it until my coffee went cold. Then I pulled out my laptop and began taking notes. Karen thought she'd stolen my patio. She had no idea what I was about to steal back. 2 days later, I woke to the sound of hammers and giggles. Not the bird song and morning breeze I was used to, but the sharp, metallic clinking of someone assembling something large and arrogant right outside my window. I pulled back the curtain and blinked in disbelief. Karen, wearing a satin robe, that screamed Bridezilla, was already out there. Pointing with a mimosa in one hand and barking orders at a group of decorators unloading equipment, it looked like a team hired for a movie set. There were crates of flowers, rolls of linen, and a speaker system being hauled into place. The kicker? We standing on my patio. I threw on a hoodie and stepped outside, still groggy but fueled by adrenaline and fury. A wooden archway draped in blush silk and already half covered in roses was being constructed right over the exact corner where I used to have my hammock. One of the decorators stepped on a potted plant I had nurtured for 3 years, snapping its stem without a second glance. "Excuse me," called out. Karen turned, sunglasses pushed high on her head like a tiara, and raised her eyebrows, as if surprised I dared to interrupt. "Oh, morning," she said with a cheerful, insincere tone. "Do you love it? Told you the lighting here was perfect. What are you doing?" I asked flatly. "You didn't even ask me if you could use this space." Karen blinked like I was being overly dramatic. "We did ask. Through the HOA. Cheryl said she left you a notice." "A notice is not consent," I shot back. "This is my property." She rolled her eyes. "Well, technically, it's a shared structure. That's how it's categorized. In the HOA plan," I looked it up. She gestured toward the seating arrangement being built. White folding chairs in neat little rows taking up every inch of walking space. Besides, it's just a few hours. Not like we're demolishing anything. I looked around. They had already taken down my fairy lights, moved my outdoor table into the corner like unwanted clutter, and someone had draped tool fabric over my fence. There were wires taped to the siding of my house. My rose trellis had been twisted to hang a floral chandelier. I walked over to my garden bench, only to find it missing. "Where's the cedar bench that was right here?" "Oh," Karen said casually. "It didn't fit the theme, so we moved it." "Don't worry, it's safe." "Well, probably. I think the caterers used it for unloading." Stared at her, struggling to find a word that fit what I was feeling. The title didn't even begin to cover it. They moved my personal furniture without permission? Karen tilted her head. "Why are you being so hostile? This is a wedding, a once-in-a-lifetime event. You should be honored. Your space was chosen." "I mean, I've always loved what you've done back here, even if your color scheme's a little rustic." Before I could respond, a man in a headset walked past me carrying a tripod, bumping into my shoulder without apology. Karen barely noticed she was too busy talking to a florist about accent petals. She'd decided I was no longer part of this equation, not the owner of the space, not a neighbor, just a minor obstacle she had already bulldozed past. I retreated inside, feeling like I was in a nightmare. I called the HOA again. Cheryl picked up, and her tone had changed. She sounded nervous. When I explained that I had never approved this, she paused and then said, "Well, we assumed you were okay with it since you didn't formally object. The board voted, and since Karen is a member..." "Let me guess," I interrupted. "The board voted unanimously." "Yes," she replied. "And honestly, it's just for one afternoon. We don't want to cause unnecessary tension in the community." Unnecessary tension. Apparently steamrolling someone's property rights didn't count as tension. When I asked about filing a formal complaint, she reminded me of the HOA fine structure and implied that pushing too hard might result in violations being reassessed. It was blackmail. Suburban, passive-aggressive blackmail. But blackmail nonetheless. By that evening, the patio was unrecognizable. A dance floor had been brought in. Lanterns hung from hooks I hadn't installed. My succulents were shoved. Under a tablecloth, strangers came and went freely, treating it like a rented venue. I saw Karen again, laughing with a wedding planner while sipping wine on the bench she said didn't fit the theme. That was the moment the tide turned. Not when the bench vanished, or when the decorations went up, but when I saw her laughing like she had won. Like this was hers now. Like I was just the background noise to her perfect day. I went back inside, closed the curtains, and locked the door. I sat in the dark, listening to the muffled music and the hum of lights strung up where mine used to be. And I started planning. She had taken what wasn't hers. But she forgot something important. This wasn't a venue. It was my home, and I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I walked across the patio like a stranger in my own home. Flower petals littered the ground, and some crew members were still buzzing around, adjusting fabric on the makeshift altar as if it were the set of a royal wedding. My cedar bench was now stacked with wedding favors, little glass jars of honey wrapped in burlap and lace. Every detail screamed curated elegance, but the more polished it looked, the more grotesque it became. It was a theft disguised as celebration. Had spent the night drafting emails, making calls, and digging into the HOA bylaws with a level of obsession I'd usually reserve for tax season. The documents were vague, of course written with enough gray area to let Karen and her cronies twist shared space into temporary appropriation. But even in that legal fog, there were glimmers of clarity. Access to shared property could not infringe on private enjoyment or override an owner's express denial of consent. That one sentence would become my sword. I printed out the clause and walked straight to the HOA office. The building was inside a converted model home, now filled with fake ficus plants and the stale scent of old coffee. Cheryl sat at the desk, tapping away at her keyboard like she was playing Minesweeper with Suburban Lives. She looked up and offered a thin smile that faltered the moment she saw the stack of papers in my hand. "I need to speak to the board," I said, firm but calm. "The board isn't—" "I know they're not here," I cut in. "Then I want this on the record!" A formal objection, including a written refusal of consent and a warning of legal escalation if the event proceeds on my patio without authorization. She shifted uncomfortably. "Listen, this is really not necessary. The event is already planned. You don't want to create bad blood in the neighborhood, do you?" I leaned forward.
"Oh."
"You created the bad blood the moment you let Karen walk onto my property and start rearranging my life like furniture in a rental hall." Cheryl hesitated. The vote was unanimous. "Oh, I'm aware," I said. "And I also found out one of your board members, Trevor H., is Karen's cousin. That's a conflict of interest. And by HOA rules, he should have recused himself from the vote." She blinked. That landed. I saw the first crack in her polished facade. "I'm not trying to ruin anyone's wedding," I added, "but this is not cooperation. This is coercion. And if the wedding happens on my patio, you'll be hearing from my attorney." Cheryl didn't respond. She nodded once quietly, and I turned and left. But I knew how these things worked. That woman wasn't going to risk upsetting Karen. They never did. Karen was the kind of person who baked cookies for the board one day and threatened to sue her neighbor for a mailbox shade the next. She was terrifying in the most insufferably polite way. I needed more than paperwork. I needed leverage. That night, I went over to Karen's house not to fight, but to give her one last chance. Her front door was already open, people going in and out, buzzing like worker bees around their queen. Karen stood inside in a satin bride robe, holding a clipboard and micromanaging the folding napkins. She noticed me immediately and forced a smile. "Oh, it's you. Did you get to see the seating chart? We adjusted it so it wouldn't completely block your back door." "You're welcome. Can't do this," I said bluntly. Karen sighed and waved someone away. "I really hoped we were past this. You're making such a big deal over nothing." "Nothing?" I replied, my voice low and sharp. "This is my home, not your venue, not your photo op." She rolled her eyes. "Look, you should honestly be grateful. We're going to have professional photos taken. Your patio is going to look amazing. It's free exposure for you." My head tilted slightly. Exposure for what? My non-existent patio rental business? Karen ignored that and continued. "Besides, Cheryl said you filed some kind of complaint." Cute. "But the board already voted. It's happening. Unless you want to be the reason an entire wedding is ruined? Do you want to be that neighbor? I'm not the one stealing private property," I said flatly. Karen dropped her fake grin. "Fine, sue me. Waste your time. The wedding is tomorrow. You're not going to stop it. So why don't you just relax, stay out of the way, and let me enjoy the most important day of my life?" I stared at her, and in that moment, I understood the truth. She genuinely believed I wouldn't do anything, that I'd fold, retreat, and let her win, because people like me always did when faced with people like her. I smiled. "Okay, Karen," I said, "enjoy your day." I turned and walked back home. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't fear. Anymore, it was a focus sharper than I'd felt in years. I wasn't going to sue, not yet. That would take time. But what I was going to do would leave an impression much faster. Because if Karen wanted to play pretend on my property, then tomorrow I'd play too, just not the role she expected. The morning of the wedding dawned quiet, too quiet. There was no birdsong, no lawnmowers, not even a dog barking down the street. Just a heavy, anticipatory silence that clung to the neighborhood like morning dew. From my kitchen window, I could already see them gathering, white vans pulling up, stylists spilling out with garment bags, decorators rushing to finalize floral arrangements on my patio. They were treating it like sacred ground, unaware of the storm they were about to walk into. I had been up since 5 a.m. sipping coffee like it was ammunition. Every minute brought more certainty. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about principle, about boundaries, about the fact that someone thought they could rewrite reality because they had a clipboard and an HOA title. By 10 a.m., the transformation was complete. My patio had become a wedding wonderland. Rows of pristine white chairs stretched from one end to the other. A silk runner led down the aisle, cutting across the garden stones I'd laid by hand. A pergola wrapped in soft pink drapery and roses had replaced the trellis I built for my jasmine vine. My succulents had been relocated again, this time behind a crate of champagne flutes. I stood inside, watching it all through the blinds like a man preparing for battle. No one noticed me. No one knocked. It was as if I had already been erased from the narrative. Just some faceless homeowner Karen had bulldozed to get her perfect suburban fantasy. At exactly noon, the music started. The guests began to arrive. All white linen and pastel dresses, wide smiles and wide-brimmed hats. A violinist played something light and airy. The air smelled like peonies and entitlement. I waited, calm, still. At 12:47 p.m. a hush fell over the gathering. Karen stepped onto the patio in her wedding dress, trailing lace and smugness. She looked like the queen of a Pinterest board. Her hair was swept into a perfect bun, her lips painted a triumphant red, and her bouquet was a screaming arrangement of ivory and blush. She walked with slow grace, soaking in every pair of eyes, every camera lens pointed at her. I opened the patio door just as she reached the center of the aisle. At first, no one noticed me. I stepped outside, slowly, deliberately. I walked across the threshold like it was mine, because it was. My presence sliced through the ceremony like a blade. The officiant stuttered. The violinist trailed off mid-note. Karen froze mid-step, her eyes locking with mine. Then I pulled the plug. Literally. The entire wedding setup was powered by extension cords plugged into outlets that ran through my house. I yanked the primary plug from the wall with one hard tug, and like a puppet show whose strings had been cut, the scene deflated. The fairy lights died. The speakers popped and went silent. The soft hum of the fan under the cake tent sputtered. To a stop, confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's smile flickered. "What? What are you doing?" she asked, her voice half whisper, half scream. I didn't answer. I walked to the side of the house and turned the sprinkler system on full blast. A faint whir preceded the burst. Within seconds, the entire patio, the guests, the chairs, the altar was being soaked with sharp jets of cold water. Gasps and shrieks erupted. A man slipped on the wet patio stones and knocked over a table of canapes. Someone screamed about their dress. Karen stood frozen in place, hair now hanging limp, makeup already streaking. I stepped up to the edge of the patio, speaking loudly so everyone could hear. "I'd like to welcome all of you to my patio. I'm the owner of this property. None of this," I gestured around, "was authorized. And since the HOA and your bride here decided to ignore my written denial of permission, I thought I'd reclaim the space myself." "You can't do this," Karen shrieked, stepping toward me with fists clenched at her sides. "This is my wedding, and this is my home," I said, unmoved. "And you're trespassing," someone in the crowd asked quietly. "Wait, he owns this place?" The whispers spread. A few guests picked up their things and scurried toward the driveway. The officiant stepped back, clearly wanting no part of what was unfolding. Karen was shaking. "You just ruined everything. You selfish. I tried to reason with you. You ignored me. You moved my furniture, trampled my garden, rewired my outlets, and held a private event here without my consent. You left me with no choice." A woman holding a soggy purse added, "Wait, so she didn't even rent this place?" "Nope," I said. She just took it. I turned around and walked back into my house. Behind me I heard chaos, people yelling, chairs being dragged across stone, someone slipping again. The party was dissolving in real time. Fantasy had popped like a balloon. I closed the door, locked it, and poured myself a drink. Outside, the sprinklers kept going. By sunset, the chaos had melted into a stunned silence. The wedding was over, not concluded, not celebrated, but utterly and irrevocably ruined. My patio, soaked and littered with crumpled petals and toppled folding chairs, looked like the aftermath of a storm. In a way, that's exactly what it was. Not a storm of weather, but of entitlement, meeting consequence. Karen's screams had echoed across the neighborhood for hours. First during the sprinkler fiasco, then again when the power cut short, her carefully curated Spotify playlist mid-vow. Her voice had reached new heights as she demanded people stay and support her on the most important day of her life. But the guests, damp and uncomfortable, weren't sticking around to play extras in a meltdown. Many had already begun, leaving while I was still in the doorway, and now she was gone too, or at least not visible. The wedding team had packed up in silence, red-faced and hurried, pretending not to notice the dripping tulle and discarded champagne flutes. They loaded everything back into their vans with the same speed people use when they flee a haunted house. I stood in my kitchen watching the last of them go. My patio was wrecked, yes, but the ownership of it had been re-established beyond question. It was mine. Every soaked cushion and cracked rose petal proved it. Later that night I got the email I was expecting. Subject line, HOA violation report and pending fine. It was almost laughable. Cheryl, sticking to the protocol like the rule book was scripture, accused me of intentionally disrupting a sanctioned event and included a potential $500 fine for malicious conduct. Malicious, I chuckled. Was it malicious to protect your home from a hostile takeover? To reclaim the very space someone stole while smiling? I didn't respond right away. I waited, because I knew something was coming, something bigger than the HOA's petty fine. The next day, the neighborhood app exploded. Someone, maybe one of the guests, maybe a vendor, had uploaded a video of the entire debacle, shot vertically and shaky. It started with Karen walking proudly down the aisle and cut sharply to me yanking the plug and turning on the sprinklers. The crowd's screams, Karen's rage, my calm voice declaring my ownership, all of it was in there. Raw, unedited, real. The caption read, "Bride steals. Neighbor's patio for wedding gets instant karma within hours." The video was trending locally. Comments poured in. The audacity. Who plans a wedding on someone's property without permission? Not all heroes wear capes. Some carry sprinkler systems. This man is a legend. HOA be damned. Attempt to bury me under red tape had backfired. People weren't outraged at me. They were cheering. A few other neighbors even began sharing their own Karen stories. One claimed she got fined for a flag that was too bright. Another said Karen once reported their toddler's tricycle as a safety hazard. The thread grew. As the tide turned. By the end of the week, the HOA quietly dropped the fine. No explanation. It's a terse follow-up email. After reviewing new context, the violation notice has been withdrawn. No apology, of course. That would require a soul. But it didn't matter. I had won something far more valuable than a fine reversal. I had forced them to see me. Karen, on the other hand, didn't show her face for days. Her house stayed dark. The just married banner she had put up over her garage was gone by Monday morning. Some said the groom had stormed off after the sprinkler fiasco. Others whispered about a postponed honeymoon. I didn't care either way. A few days later, I received a knock at the door. was a fellow homeowner, Marlene, an older woman from 3 houses down. She held a small tray of cookies and gave me a knowing smile. "I saw the video," she said. "You were right to do what you did." "Thanks," I replied, half expecting a lecture. She leaned in slightly. "And if you're thinking of running for the HOA board, you'd have my vote." I didn't say anything right away, just nodded. But the idea planted itself in my mind. Maybe it was time someone who knew what boundaries looked like had a seat at the table. That weekend, I reclaimed my patio piece by piece. I pulled up the soaked decorations, swept away the remnants of Karen's fantasy, and replanted my succulents. The jasmine trellis was broken, but I'd rebuild it. The cedar bench had a wine stain. I sanded it out. The space wasn't perfect anymore, but it felt more like mine than ever before. And just to make sure no one got any bright ideas in the future, I had a small custom sign made and hung it on the garden gate. Private property, not a wedding. Venue beneath it. In smaller letters, I added, "Steal it again, and I'll bring the sprinklers twice as fast." No one's mistaken it since.